Hello. My name is Emery. Welcome to Coding Australia. This project is called Dog and Parrot.
Okay, this project number 4 is going to, we're going to start by having a dog jump a fire hydrant, one of those 2D type games, and then we'll expand that into something a bit more challenging down the track. To get things started, we need to have our backdrop moving from right to left, and our dog will jump to the other in the opposite direction. So let's go and get a backdrop. This is a good one. You can draw your own too if you want. We'll get rid of that. And we'll duplicate this and we'll flip it over, and then we'll check to see how it's going by setting up some time. So a forever and a next backdrop. Alright, and as expected it's going a bit quick, so if we slow it down a bit, maybe like that, that's fairly manageable. Okay, now we could add clouds to our backdrops, but we'll set up a separate sprite instead. So we're going to draw a sprite which we'll call clouds, which is just basically drawing some clouds. We turn it to a vector, get our colour, get a circle, make sure it's filled in. I'll blow up to 200 to make it a bit easier to draw. Yep, a bit bigger maybe, and then a second one. Those look better with a couple of clouds tacked together, and that one's maybe slightly smaller. So that's a pretty good spot, and I guess we should try and center it a bit there maybe. So there's our cloud, and we want that cloud to move across as well. So we'll go with a script, same thing. We want the cloud to start somewhere on the side there, so our go-to is probably going to be around about 220, and our Y will probably be about 135, and then we want it to slide across the screen, so we'll put it in a forever similar to the backdrop, and we will change the value of our X. So let's change X by, we're going negative, we're going left, so make it -5, and let's see what happens here. We'll probably have a problem. Let's just find out. That's going pretty good, and of course it just keeps going, and the reason is that what we really need to do is to put that in there and that in there. Now let's see how that works. Not bad. Let's blow that out to say 90. See what that does. Yes. That's a fairly safe speed. Alright. Now let's draw another sprite. We'll get to the cat soon. Let's go for a new sprite which we'll get out of the library. We'll get the fire hydrant just down here, and we want it to start in a similar spot. So if we go and get this and put it over the fire hydrant, then if it starts in a similar spot, except that it's probably going to be closer to that. And the other thing that we might have a problem with is the size. So before we do anything, we'll change the size. Let's go with 35. See how that looks. That's good. It's not going too quick. We want the dog to be able to jump the fire hydrant a few times. That's where we're heading with this project. Alright, so next up, that's what we'll do. Look at the dog. Alright, now I've been referring to a dog in the first lesson. I've got rid of the cat, and we'll go and get the dog sprite and start doing some things with the dog. I'm going to use dog 2, and I'll start him off over there, and he's going to jump. So first things first, we'll just get him in the right position, him, her, whatever. So let's go there, a little bit further maybe, and up a little bit perhaps. Let's see how that looks. That's good. So as he gets, as he gets to this hydrant, he's going to jump. And to make him jump, we need to press a key. So we will press the up arrow, and when we press the up arrow, we'll use a glide to go up and a glide to go down. So to go up and down, let's see how that looks. See if we've got some gliding happening here. Yep, we do. And we might speed it up a little bit. How does that look? Alright, and if we want the dog to actually move across the screen, then we need to do this. Alright, and we'll have to do some tweaking again in a minute as well. So we're going to change X by that. Now if we do that, we need to use the X position, otherwise the dog will just keep going back to the original position. So let's see if that's working. Slowly moving across the screen, little bit by little bit. That's good. Let's try 20. Move things a little bit faster. Try that. See how that looks. That's a bit further. So dog is moving across the screen, and of course the next thing is what happens when the dog doesn't get over the hydrant, which is what we'll do next. So we've got our dog jumping the way we want, and the next thing we need to do is decide what happens if the dog doesn't actually make it over the fire hydrant. And the way we do that is we'll put a check in here. So we'll put an if statement. So if there's a touching happening here, we want something to happen. We want it to happen in a few places. So the way we do that is we use one of these broadcasts, and we'll call it touched, and then when we receive touched, for the moment we'll just stop everything. So we'll keep our messages confined to each sprite, because later on you'll see why that happens. And we want the dog to stop, and we want the clouds to stop, and we want the backdrop to stop. And you'll notice that it actually cleverly says stage, not script, sprite, which is rather handy to know. Alright, so back here, this happens, things happen. So let's see what happens here. So we can get over it a couple of times without touching, and see what happens if we do touch. So far so good. Oh, we're doing quite well here. Let's try not to make it. Okay, everything stops. Cloud stop, backdrop stop, except the dog keeps jumping. So we need to do something about stopping the key presses. Something we need to consider sort of long term as well, because we're going to use other keys left and right and so forth further down the track. So we could do a touching sort of, if not touching, but I think probably the best thing to do here is to create a variable, and we'll call it switch, and it needs to be probably for all sprites for the moment. So we'll have a switch, and we'll set the switch to, we can do whatever we want, but if we set the switch to 0, then we can do this. We can use this switch down the track for other bits and pieces too. So then we can say, well, if the switch is set to 0, keep doing the up and down arrow stuff. But if the dog is touching, then we'll set the switch to something else. So if we set the switch to 1 there, and then we may use the switch for other things later on. Okay, let's see if that works. And I'm hitting the up down arrow key and nothing's happening because the switch has been set to 1, and then over here it says if it's 0, keep doing that. So that's pretty handy to have. Now the last thing I guess we can do here before we go on to the next lesson is do something to the dog. Let's do something like this, and we'll do maybe a pixelate is good, just so that we know something's happened to the dog. No, didn't make it. Next thing we'll check out did make it next lesson. Okay, let's try it. Here we go. So over. Oh, that was quick. Didn't make it. Pixelated. So the dog does its thing, and it gets over the hydrant, or it doesn't. So what we want to do is move on. So if the dog makes it over the hydrant X number of times, we want the game to move to something else. So for that to happen, we'll probably have to keep track. So let's say, for example, the dog makes it over the hydrant 5 times. So we'll keep track of that. Let's have a new variable called jumps, which we'll keep track of. I'm leaving these switched on. You can turn them off here when you don't need them, but they're handy when you're developing to keep an eye on what's going on. So we can since the dog's the main actor here, we'll set the jumps to 0, and even though we're setting the jumps to 0 here, and it's a variable for all sprites, in effect we're going to keep track over here of what's actually going on. So for this particular activity, it doesn't really matter where you set the jump to 0 as long as it's when you click a green flag. Over here we're going to change the jump by 1 if he makes it each time, so we're going to keep track of it each time, and so each time the dog succeeds, it'll change the jump by 1. However, having said that, we need to also check at some point if the dog made it. So in here we've got the touching, and then here we're going to do the jumping. So let's say we set the jump to if the jump is 5, we want a few things to happen, so we're going to have another broadcast. Just a minute. Let's have a broadcast called jumps. Okay, and I'll probably be faster to duplicate this, and jumps. So for the moment we stop. Over here we stop as well. We won't do anything to the dog though. And same story here, and same story there. So if we get to 5, we'll see what happens. Now we need to go back and just check the logic of this loop, because it starts at 0 and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll just check to see if that makes sense or not, or whether we should in fact do the jump change somewhere else or set the initial value to something else. So let's just run it and see how we go. I've got to get over this thing 5 times for it to work. 1, 2, 3. Keep trying. 1, 2, 3. Wow, it's working anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, it stopped. Okay, so at that moment in time we're going to move on to the next part. What happens next? Okay, so we've got past this part, and we know once we get to 5 we're going to move on, and I've made a few tweaks, and when we get to 5 you'll notice that everything just stops, including the jumping, and the reason for that is this. Over here I've added a hide to the hydrant, and you've got to put a show back in here, right, because we're going to get rid of the hydrant when we move on to the next bit. So we hide the sprite. I got rid of the jumps that broadcast here and here because we want this thing, the clouds and the backdrop, to keep going. So hydrant disappears but the clouds keep going. Now the dog, the switch which was over here, it's been taken out and put where it probably should be, which is close by what we're trying to switch. So there's a switch and there's a switch. Okay, and as you can see, when we get to this point I've stopped it, but things keep going. Alright, so what happens next? Well, what happens next is we go and get another sprite, and the sprite I'm going to get is down here. I'm going to get the parrot. Okay, then the parrot's going to be up here flying, toing and froing, and it's going to drop apples on the dog. I know that sounds a bit silly, but that's what we're going to do. Alright, so when we start, there's going to be action going down the bottom here while we set this parrot up, so don't worry about that. So the parrot is going to start in a particular spot. Let's see, 0, 100 might be good. It's good, and it probably needs to be a bit smaller, so maybe half the size. Let's see how we're looking. Yep, that looks pretty good. And just ignore the bottom part, we're just developing this. Now the parrot, we need to go to and fro, which we'll do. So this hopefully will look a little bit familiar, and we'll just use a forever for now, and we'll move the parrot, and we'll go to the next costume, forever, and if we're on the edge we're going to bounce. So let's just see how that looks. That parrot's going really fast. So we've got 2 costumes now. You may remember from the bat that we had more bats, and if you want to enhance that you can. I'm just going to stick with the 2 for a minute, and I'm going to slow it down a little bit. Maybe, let's see if that's enough. Let's see. Yeah, well, when you've got more things happening, like, you know, more costumes here, it won't look like it's flying so hard. Okay, now as I said, we're going to drop apples on the dog. So to do that, we're going to have to get a little bit clever here. I'm going to go and get another sprite, and it's the apple. Okay, and for now I'm going to hide it. Just simply hide it. Okay, for now. So there it is. But we want the apple to be attached to the parrot, but then we want it to detach from the parrot and hit the dog. So there's a few ways you can do this. The way I'm going to do it is like this. Stop this, get the apple costume, and I'm going to copy it. So the way I do that is I click on it and I hit Control C, which is copy. Then I go over to my parrot, which is here, and then I click Control V, and there's the apple. Okay, and I'm going to send it back a little bit, like so. And later on, when you ungroup the parrot, you can have one behind the other. For the moment, we'll just live with it the way it is. Another Control V, bring that down there, send it to the back a little bit. It's probably gone too far back. That's okay. We haven't ungrouped the wings, but if you did, I'll bring it forward again for a moment. Oh, whatever. You get the hang of it. So there's the parrot. Now let's just see what we've got here. Right, good. We've got an apple attached to the parrot, which is what we want. And then at some point, maybe using the space bar or something like that, you're going to let this apple go. And in the meantime, we also want the dog to be able to move. So we'll come back to the parrot and the apple. Let's go over to the dog and let's add a... Oh wait, I'll just leave that there for the moment. That's not what's going to happen. In effect, all this is going to be happening if this happens. Okay, so we can do our set size there, and we can hide it, and then we can just put a show in here, and when we get through the jumps, the parrot will appear with its little apple. Okay, so the last thing we need to do now is just to add a couple of arrows to our dog. Now, the switch thing kicks in again, and we're going to have to have got the switch set to 1 and the switch set to 1, but in effect you'll see in a moment we want the switch to set to something else, and it works like this. So we want a couple of... This is for the dog. So when the left arrow is pressed, we want the dog to go left, and when the right arrow is pressed, we want the dog to go right. Okay, so... But we don't want the arrows to be on all the time, so we have to do another one of these control things. So what we're going to do is put another if in here. I can duplicate and do this later. So if the switch is set to something else, so if the switch equals something else, well, it's not 1. If it's 1, we're going to have it going when it gets touched. So if we make that at 2, then this is off, this is on. So if it equals 2, then things start happening, and we will keep it pretty straightforward. If we're going left, we're going to point in direction left, and we're going to move 10 steps. Now let's just test this thing. Interesting. I mustn't have... there you go. See, little things, little things. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, good. Now the reason that's happening is that didn't point back to where it should have been to start with, so it's actually pointing in direction left and moves 10 steps. So if the switch equals 2, we do that. This is going to also obviously going to be need to be cleaned up a bit, and we point in direction right. Okay, now we'll see if we can make it through the 5 jumps and get the arrows working, and there's a little tweak that we need to do way back up here. Is we better make sure that when we start that the dog is pointing in the correct direction. Okay, and then we also might want to give the impression we're walking here in a minute. So let's just see if we can get through this first part. So far so good. 1 to go. Yep, it's working. We got that far. Now the next thing we'll look at is dropping the apple and getting a little bit clever with the costume so he looks like he's walking. So I got through the first part with the hydrant, and now what we've got is I'm using the left arrow, and now I'm using the right arrow. So right, left. Birds is flying, toing and froing at the moment. So what we want to do is give the impression that the dog's walking. And the way we do that is we're going to have to focus on specific costumes. This particular costume I'm going to use separately. So these are the two we're interested in. And we just wanted to flick between two costumes like that. There's a couple of ways we could do this, but we'll just do it this way. So for now, see how it works. So down here we want to swap costumes. So the first thing we do is, just to make sure we don't forget, and I've done it already, is I want to start, so at the beginning when you run you want to start with the first dog. So we'll just start with the first dog. We could start with the second, it doesn't matter, but anyway, that's what we start with. Now having said that, we want to switch to that costume. Okay, however we want to switch back and give it the impression that we're toing and froing. So you've got to if you just put that there like that, it's just going to switch to B and stay there. If you put the other one in there, well, every time you hit the left arrow you need to know, am I togged to A or am I togged to B, and then I hit the arrow. So how we do that is we get one of these if statements with an else in it, and we go if we're costume thing we want that one, and if we're something or other else we want the other one. So let's go get the other one. So we're working on B and A. So if something's happening, switch to that, else switch to that. Okay, so and we put that back in there like that, and we use this little treasure down here, costume number, and we can then say, well, what do we want? Well, we want it to be equal to, if it's equal to costume number 1, we want to switch to costume number 2. So we go over here and we say, if it's switch costume number 1, we want it to switch to costume number 2. Now let's see if this is actually going to work. I've got to start again. There we go. So he's walking, which is good. This one isn't, but you don't have to be, it'll be too tricky to figure out how to fix that up. What we do is, it's probably quicker to just get rid of that, duplicate this, put it over here, whoops, put it over there, make it the right arrow, and the same thing, only point in the other direction. Okay, so we've now got our left and right arrows working, and we've got the dog doing its thing. Now, here we go. Sometimes you've got to start again, and sometimes it just kicks in straight away. I think if the left arrow, the fact that it was running probably helped. So there's the dog going and toing and froing, and there's the bird over there about to do something about the apple. And we'll go to another lesson to do that because it's going to be quite involved. So I said in the previous lesson we were going to work on tweaking the parrot, and the parrot needs to drop the apples. We'll work on the apple a bit later, but at the moment we're still working on the parrot. So the parrot at the moment, I've just got it set up so it runs to the bottom once again, just it crashes, but that's alright, we'll get that sorted later. So here's the parrot, and it's swinging from left to right, and the reason it's doing that is because there are now 4 parrots, not 2, and very similar, if you remember, to the bat lesson at the start. If you go back and have a look, if you're not sure how this works, it goes 1 2 3 4 3 2 1 4 3 4 3 2 through this script here with a new variable called wings, and the script very similar, except it joins Parrot wings and name, which means of course you need to name your costumes like so. Okay, now what you've got to do is do a little bit of artwork here. When you ungroup, you'll be able to put your apple between the claws as well. So your first 4 parrots, you'll have your apple between the claws, and then while you're here, if you duplicate those 4 costumes in order, give you 5 6 7 and 8 without the apple. So you just click on it, get rid of the apple in each one of these, make sure they don't move, and so you've got 1 2 3 4 and 5 6 7 8. Now the space bar is what's going to release the apple from the parrot, and it's just a matter of duplicating all this and putting it over here, changing the value of wings and stopping the other script, and making sure you're pointing in a direction, because pointing in direction means that if the parrot's going left, it'll keep going left, and if it's going right, it'll keep going right. So let's just see if this thing works or not. So parrot going that way, and there we go, apple's gone. And we'll work on getting the apple back. But right now we managed to get rid of the apple, which is good. Okay, now there's a heck of a lot of duplication going on here, and I just happen to have, hiding away down here, a second parrot. So this parrot uses a block, and that block is called Parrot, and it's got one variable or option, call it what you like. It's a numeric one, and it's called wings. So if you make a block called Parrot with wings, this will come up, and then what you do is you drag any one of these, doesn't matter which one it is, and put it under there and drag wings down onto there. You then have call up 1. Then in here all you need to do is put your 2 parrots in with the 1 and a -1 and a 1 and a -1, and watch what happens. First thing we're going to do is go and turn this side off to stop us having a bit of a duplication and problem. So we'll get rid of them, and we'll go back over here and we'll bring these ones back. This is all temporary stuff, as you probably worked out. So we do that, and then we just click that onto there, and away we go. Looks exactly the same. Exactly the same. But this is a lot neater, because you don't need any of that. You just need that. And of course this jumps will go in here. Once we start running the program, this is when I receive jumps, I want all this to happen. Okay, so in reality this is what we want to happen, like that. Okay, and this one is a hide, like so. And if you run through this with this, and I'm going to delete that parrot, or keep it if you want, just keep it hidden in case things go wrong. Alright, as long as it's hidden, it's not affecting anything. But this is the parrot that would actually do its thing now. So you test it, see how it goes. Alright, so last time we were looking, we managed to get the apple to drop and so forth, and put everything back the way it is. We're going to do one little tweak here with the arrow keys. Actually, it's the switch is at 2 at the moment because I haven't reset, so it still lets me to move this, and even if I hit the space bar, it lets me do that and get the apple back as well. So we'll see how far we get with this. As you can see, the dog can get off the screen, so one thing we've got to do in here is put another if statement that just gets a look at the exposition. So let's put that in here, and what we're going to do is just check for our X position, and if we're going left we'll duplicate that because we'll need it over there as well. For the X position we want it to be greater than something. Let's make it greater than, say, -200. Put that in there, and then we'll have a less than 200 over there. So we'll drop an if in there, less than 200, X position, less than 200, oops, 200, and see how that works. Okay, moving left, yep, dog stops. Moving right, dog stops. Okay, so that just stops the dog walking off the screen. Now, let's get to the more important part, which is the parrot dropping the apple. Now, first thing we need another variable called apple, which I'll switch on. Okay, and you're going to see something happening here in a minute. So, we need to turn this apple on and drop it, and so we actually create another broadcast called drop apple. So create a new broadcast called drop apple, and this new piece of script, what it does is it sets an apple position to the X position of the parrot, so it keeps track of this thing, and it then does a little tweak here. Now we'll come back and have a look at that in a minute, and then a broadcast drop apple. So that is going to go in there like that. Okay, alright, so just have a look at that. This is checking the direction of the parrot and changing the value of apple, so the apple position moves just ever so slightly, and there's a reason for that, because when the apple drops you want it to drop from the claws of the parrot, so it's going that way and going that way, and you'll see there's a reason we do that, to make it look like the apple's for real. Okay, now over here in the apple script you've got a new script called when I receive drop apple. So the apple's hidden, you show it, you go there and you glide and you hide, and you see what happens. Okay, so let's try it. So our doggy's still moving and our apple's dropping. Okay, and the other thing of course that's happening is that if you go back over here and have a look, down the bottom of here is a broadcast jump, so it goes back to the first 4 parrots. So this thing just keeps going around and around and around, and drops the apple in the right spot. So see, it looks like it's actually dropping it out of the claws of the parrot, because you've moved the apple position ever so slightly depending on which direction the parrot is flying. Rather neat. Now the last thing we need to do is go, well, what happens if the apple hits the dog? So if the apple hits the dog, then in here somewhere, if the apple hits the dog, we probably want the dog to do something. So apple hits dog if there's a good spot. If the apple touches the dog, we want to probably broadcast hit dog will do, or got dog, hit dog. So we'll broadcast a new one called got dog. Gee. So got dog. Alright, and over here when we receive got dog, we'll switch to the third costume, wait a couple of seconds, half a second maybe, and then switch back to the original dog, like so. Okay, let's see what's happening here. So I'm moving the right and left arrow so the dog moves, and then I'm letting the apple go. Oh, got him. Alright, let's have a look here. Not quite. Got him. Okay. Got him. And then if you want, you can enhance this costume. Maybe a bit of red. So he looks like he's been splattered. Let's see how we go. Oh, back to the beginning. Let's see if I can get back over there again. It's from the beginning. You can switch all those variables off too at some stage, once you know they're working. Alright, here comes the parrot, drops an apple, misses, gets another apple, got him. Okay, got him. Ooh, got him. There we go.
Thank you, too.